Welcome back, gentlefolk and rapscallions of all persuasions. So back in April, I read two different books by two different authors that I was kind of on the fence about, and now I like one more than I did before, and I like the other one a little bit less. So here's about how it went. Leigh Bardugo and Jay Kristoff are obviously some pretty big names in fantasy, and they both had new books come out in March/April. I watched Shadow and Bone, and me being the book snob that I am, immediately wanted to pick up the book series and see how it stacked up. I didn't really like the trajectory of some of the character arcs that happened in Shadow and Bone. I also think that they changed a few things for the screen that some worked, some didn't. Other YouTubers have covered that. I'm not really going to go into it here. Her Alex Stern series, on the other hand, absolutely devoured. I think I went through Ninth House and Hellbent both in the span of a week, and I wasn't intending to go through them that quickly. It drew me in, and I couldn't help myself. So when I found out that Leigh Bardugo was having another book coming out sometime soon and it was going to be a standalone, I immediately signed up to pre-order it. It came out back in April, and so I'm definitely late to the party talking about it, but to be perfectly honest, I just didn't care to get to it. Anybody who's been following this channel for a while will see I have a new background. There was some furniture moving and some big life milestones and some technical upgrades. So if you've been around since the terrible audio quality of my original video on this channel about Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, drop down in the comments and let me know if this sounds better, because God, I sure hope it does. It's been a long journey to get here. Other booktubers have covered The Familiar, so I'll just recap it quickly here. It's Renaissance Spain. A girl who can perform little miracles is entered into a tournament to become the king's magician at the urging of her employer, and falls in love with a man who is teaching her to use her gifts. The problem is that I care about literally every other character in the story except the main couple that the romance is focusing on. All of them have much more depth and conflict in their storylines than the romance does. But I think the main problem that I had with The Familiar is also the main problem I had with Shadow and Bone, which in Shadow and Bone I just chalked up to a lack of experience because it was a debut. And it's that the world building doesn't really feel good. It feels like the whole thing is taking place on a stage, and if I look too hard, I'm going to see the supports holding up the facade. It was all just a little bit thin. Why didn't I have this problem with Ninth House? Well, there wasn't a whole lot of world building that she had to invent, Shadow and Bone, or translate from research, The Familiar. Leigh Bardugo was a student at Yale. She was a member of a secret society. But also, now that I think harder about it, I had a few narrative problems with the Alex Stern series, namely that it doesn't seem like a whole lot has happened even though we're 2 books in. It was like the second season of Lock and Key on Netflix, where narratively we're pretty much in the same place where we started. I'll finish out the series because I have a weakness for dark academia, and related note, that's why the Atlas series was such a fucking disappointment. Overall, I don't think that Leigh Bardugo is someone that I'm going to rush out and buy new books from. I will wait a few days or weeks for booktubers that I trust to review and weigh in on them. If you love her, I love that for you. I just don't think I'm one of her peeps. I will talk about Brandon Sanderson until the day I die, but I'm mature enough to recognize that for all his fame and my personal feelings, there are just people out there who are not going to like Brandon Sanderson. And I put my face on the internet and have strong opinions about things, but we can all like what we like and still get along. That brings me to the second half of this video and Jay Kristoff. Holy hell, if you like dark second world fantasy interspersed with some humor, drop what you are doing right now and go get Empire of the Vampire. The main character is a half-vampire hybrid who's sworn to an order of sacred vampire hunters, who is drawn away from a quest for revenge into a desperate plot to try and save the world. A few decades before the start of the story, a global cataclysm kicked enough debris into the air to mostly blot out the sunlight, and this allowed the vampires to no longer have to literally hide in the shadows, and they've taken over most of the world. My experience with Jay Kristoff prior to Who This is his Nevernight series, which had a good premise, but I felt was a little bit self-indulgent. It had some tropes that are absolutely shut up and take my money tropes. There is a speculative school. This one is for assassins. People learning about poisons and antidotes, some absolutely insane world building. Cons include the use of footnotes, which was utterly lost on me because I listened to the audiobooks and I just thought that there was a sassy narrative voice throughout the whole thing. The Illuminae Files, which Jay Kristoff co-wrote with Amy Kaufman, was an absolute masterpiece of sci-fi, and it was another one of those things that I devoured in about a week. I went through the whole trilogy in, I think, 6 days. I have a video on that in the editing stage. It should be up soon, and I go more in depth on my feelings there, so I won't repeat it here, but he did some absolutely amazing things with characters in the Illuminae Files. It was excellent tension and pacing from beginning to end, and I wondered if maybe the effect of a co-author kind of toned him down a little bit because of what I read from him in Nevernight. Now that I'm on Empire of the Damned, I think that might be the case, but also the world and stakes that he built are incredible, and I can't wait to see how this turns out. The mystery box is used to good effect, and not to the point where it becomes annoying. Vampires are the bad guys, which is something I love, and there's a sort of sensual body horror going on that just works for me, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's read the vampires that I have written. And I'll just get this out of the way. Yes, I was a teenage girl in the late aughts, and one of my dear friends sent me a short that said, "You either had a Twilight phase or an anti-Twilight phase, and either way you invested emotion into Twilight. Your Twilight phase." And because I had an anti-Twilight phase, I felt seen, and I hated it. That's not to say that I was not a fangirl for a vampire franchise of questionable content and quality, which led me to buy the Bourbon that Ian Somerhalder and Paul Wesley did. This is in no way sponsored, I'm just a trash fangirl, and as you can see, I must have hated it because, this is all it's left. The Whiskey Enthusiast article that I came across that alerted me to the existence of this bourbon compared it to Angel's Envy and Basil Hayden, and I think that that's an accurate comparison. It is not overly complex. If you're somebody who likes to have a very nuanced bourbon drinking experience, this is probably going to be a little bit on the lighter side for you. That being said, it's very easy drinking and it makes a wonderful whiskey sour, so if you're in the market for a new bourbon, I highly recommend it. So, Empire of the Vampire convinced me that Jay Kristoff is an author that I will likely spend time and energy following in the future, and Lee Bardugo just isn't. If you liked this video, please do all of the delicious things that feed the almighty algorithm, like, share, and subscribe, and drop down in the comments and tell me what you think about the books I talked about today. Until next time, cheers!